I'm Dan Sheehy. I got into ethnomusicology in a way by accident. I was studying to be a high school band director in the late 60s, and I played rhythm and blues in Compton in South Los Angeles. One of the greatest experiences of my life was basically an African-American blues band in a really funky nightclub at a really interesting time in American history. And after that, I started playing mariachi music professionally and was immersed in communities. Had that rich life, that experience that surrounds music and gives meaning to music. And at one point in time in my studying to be a band director, I realized that in the educational system, at least in California where I was at the time, didn't include any of the musics that I really came to fall in love with. Where was James Brown? Where was Otis Redding? Where was Aretha Franklin? They weren't in my music education. Where was Mariachi Vargas de Tecalitlán? Nowhere. Where was the Ashanti drumming that I started to study at UCLA when I was still an music education student? Nowhere. And it just sort of started to grow on me as kind of a slow burn in a way. So I had two pillars that shaped the rest of my career in what a lot of people call public ethnomusicology or public sector ethnomusicology. One was awe for the musicians and what they did, and then also that rich social fabric around music making and music appreciation. And the other was, frankly, I was kind of ticked off because I felt like I'd been cheated in my whole educational system, and a lot of other people being cheated too. None of this music that was really good music by pretty much any standards was there. And so at that point in time, we got a few accidental invitations from people like Bess Lomax Hawes, Alan Lomax's sister, who was working for the Smithsonian at the time, and the Folklife Festival. What we call the Folklife Festival now is the Festival of American Folklife then. And part of this wasn't just doing a festival. There was this whole brain trust of people like Roger Abrams, Alan Lomax, Bess Lomax Hawes, Margaret Mead was involved there, Ralph Rinsler, Henry Glassy, others who were really putting some serious thinking chops into what really was the purpose of this festival. And the purpose of the festival wasn't really to do a festival. I mean, sure it was. I mean, we did a festival. But it was really to address what I had discovered accidentally in my life trajectory, and that was there are all these social hierarchies that surround music that unfortunately, from my point of view at the time, lead people to value music one way or another, usually undervalue music because of the social hierarchy of privileged Western European music at the time, and in a way pop music as far as that goes. So that kind of led me to take on this task of doing field work for the Smithsonian for the Folklife Festival in 1974, 1975, 76, and many years afterwards, and being kidnapped by folklorists and falling in with the applied folklore crowd. And eventually, when I was doing field work in Veracruz on a Fulbright, I got a call saying, hey, you might be interested in working at the National Endowment for the Arts, which became my first real institutional affiliation. Stayed there 23 years, eventually was the director of the Folk and Traditional Arts program. And then moved on to the Smithsonian Institution as director of and curator of Smithsonian Folkways Recordings, and for a while director of the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage. For me, looking back on it at different points, it's really about people. You know, music is something that sort of is between us, or it's something. My basic philosophy has come to be as a kind of a check to at any point in time, is that music has no meaning whatsoever. The only meaning that music has is the meaning that people give it. And what does that mean for us who care about people who care about communities, who care about cultural equity, who care about a lot of things that in my line of work is our daily bread. That's what we do every day. It's really that finding what that meaning is, and also realizing that communities can give it more meaning, and they do give it more meaning. And in fact, there are different communities out there that give different meanings to music. And if we can, as people who align ourselves with those music makers, with those communities of origin of the musics we're talking about, then we might actually be able to help out in some way. I'm happy to say that the field has changed over the years, the field of applied folklore and ethnomusicology, to being one more of a kind of a researcher and then an interlocutor in terms of standing up front with our hands folded, and introducing a music to the rest of the world, whoever that might be at the time, to really a multivocal, much more collaborative process, which I think has yielded much richer results in terms, just about every term you can think of, in terms of our understanding, in terms of doing meaningful work in the eyes of communities themselves, in the hearts and ears of communities themselves.